Hey, it's Clip of the Day time where Buck Sexton and I pick out the best hot take, the most fun that we had for all of you to be able to experience on the show.
That's right, and this segment is brought to you by ExpressVPN, which is the virtual private network that we trust to protect our online data.
When I use ExpressVPN, the big tech companies can't see my IP address, my identity is anonymized, and my data's encrypted. That gives me the absolute maximum protection.
And what I like is how easy it is to use. Just download the app to your phone or computer, and you're protected. So visit expressvpn.com/patriot today, and you'll get an extra 3 months free, or you can click on the link in the description below.
That's expressvpn.com/patriot, and now it's time for the clip of the day.
I think what's going to end up happening months from now when this decision actually comes down is they are going to uphold the Mississippi law, and they are going to do it, however, within the existing framework of Casey and Roe, make it even more tortured and difficult to understand the rulings. You heard stare decisis mentioned there. For people who are not familiar with that phrase, that's basically the idea that you need to respect existing precedent, which John Roberts has deferred to a great deal. And so that's why I think this is the most likely outcome. Mississippi law is permissible, but they are not going to overturn Roe v. Wade or Casey. What do you think based on your reading and listening of the arguments today?
The argument for the pro-life side was going well today overall. I mean, just start with that. The people who were listening in would have caught some of this, but I spent, from the gaveling in until we had to come on air here, Clay, listening to the back and forth. And there were only really a couple of areas that it seemed like in this case, obviously the Biden administration side, the Solicitor General, really dug in on. You mentioned stare decisis, just precedent, right? Stare decisis, fancy Latin term for
precedent, basically, and deference to precedent.
And Kavanaugh, I think, did a very good job, among others. Essentially, that's right, that Brett Kavanaugh, the guy that they tried so desperately to keep off the Supreme Court, we all remember that, saying, well, yeah, precedent is precedent until it's not, right? Yeah. Until all of a sudden you decide that same-sex marriage needs to be legal with Obergefell, or until you decide, and then beyond just that, there's also the stains on the Supreme Court's history, Korematsu, Dred Scott, where clearly it was just wrong, right? It was a moral and legal wrong. So that's not really the argument that I think the left wants to believe that it is in something like this, where it hasn't played out the way that they wanted it to, right? Initially, one of the arguments, and this came up in favor of Roe and then Casey, was, well, this will cool things down, right? This will kind of take this so that everyone knows what the rules are. No, it hasn't. In fact, if anything, I think it's made the issue even more divisive, because the position here of the conservatives on the court isn't that they're going to have a federal ban on abortion. The conservatives on the court, if they went, I think, by the way, you are right. I don't know what the betting odds would be on this or if there really is such a thing, but the smart money from a lot of conservative legal minds I know lines up with what you said, which is they'll let the Mississippi law stand, but they won't necessarily go all the way in and say, look, Roe is bad law, or Roe and Casey, in essence, parts of them are bad law. So the precedent issue, I think, didn't go very, very well for them. And then also viability came up a lot. What is the viability line? And this has played out over a long period of time now, decades, where how is that even really a legal concept? For one thing, viability, meaning when can a fetus survive outside the womb? That changes, is variable, and if anything, has been moving earlier and earlier in the gestation process. So how are we even pretending that that's really, and that came up very clearly in some of the arguments. I think Thomas, you have all these different, you can't see them, right? Which actually, you realize how much it hurts your memory of these things, but you don't see. I think Thomas talked about it. Alito might have brought it up. But the viability issue, I think, is another place where, because you even have leftists, Clay, who will say that's pretty arbitrary. And so if it's arbitrary, why not send it back to the states and allow them to make their own distinctions about this? Which, you could see it, right? You could see a 5-4 bombshell, I don't know what better word to use, legal avalanche decision here. But if you were listening on the merits today, I think that it was a very strong showing for the anti-abortion, pro-life side of the equation. I think they're feeling pretty good about the case that was made today before the court.
All right, here's what else I would say. I want to play this because, not surprisingly, temperatures are all ratcheted up. the left wing in this country is losing its mind. This is on MSNBC, I believe, Joy Reid's show, and abortion activist Liz Winstead said people who support abortion restrictions also support, what do you think, white supremacy. Listen to this argument.
The lower court, the Fifth Circuit, the most conservative court in the land, twice said, you know what? This isn't going to pass muster. And the state of Mississippi and the extreme conservatives there went to the Supreme Court to say, we want a hearing, and they got one. And that should make everyone take a pause, right? And so folks learning about who are the legislatures, who are the governors in your state, who are the people who are running solely on this issue, because so many of them are, and looking the intersections of those people and white supremacy and how they feel about guns and how they feel about all this stuff. And I think that it's all intersectional and we need to pay attention closely.
I mean, it does make me think, Clay, which, first of all, when they're talking about white supremacy in the context of abortion, you go back and look at Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. You go back and look at the early philosophy of the pro-abortion side.
Oh, yeah.
And there's
a lot of
eugenics thread in their thinking. A lot of the, well, society won't want fill in the blank, kids that are unwanted in a whole different range of categories. And it's horrific. I mean, when you actually know the history of Planned Parenthood, you understand why this is an organization that it's really shocking that it's been able to exist in the American mainstream and become so powerful. I mean, there's really nothing in the Democrat Party as an issue where I think you are you'll be as outraged by, when it comes to your own side, you'll upset people as much as if you're a Democrat who breaks from them on the issue of abortion. I mean, Planned Parenthood will go after you. There's a ferociousness that it enforces its dictates with. And so we'll have to see if finally, I think the court decides that creating a constitutional right out of thin air is, that's a stain on the court. They kept talking about how will the institution survive. I remember, even hearing a very left-wing law professor in college, they call it law and jurisprudence at my school, talking about how, look, it's not good law. He would say, I think Roe is great, but it's not good law.
That's right.
Everyone kind of knows that. And so saying, oh, but no, actually, this never should have been what the court did. They were wrong on the implications over the long term. That's why the 50 years matter so much, because we've seen what's actually happened. And for conservatives out there, I think this is a moment where you got to ask yourself, if we don't conserve life, what are we conserving? And one of my frustrations has been in conservative media now for over a decade, I guess, Clay. Time flies. People always say, you talk about abortion, they turn the dial. You talk about abortion, they change the channel. We're not conserving life. I don't really know what we're even showing up to do as a conservative in the media. This is a central issue, and finally, it seems there may be some real headway toward justice.
A couple of things here. One, calling people who oppose abortion white supremacists, given that the overwhelming numbers from a per capita basis of abortions are occurring are minorities, right? So it's a straining of white supremacy on an incredible level to argue that white supremacy is actually protecting minority life, right, for that argument. But the other thing I would say here, Buck, is there is a lot of histrionics on this argument. I think it's important to put in context what would happen. Like, I don't think that they're going to overturn Roe v. Wade and Casey. But if this court did, they could. If they did, it would not end abortion in the United States.
Right.
It would return this decision to state legislatures and governors, and many states would say abortion is not legal. 12 of them instantaneously, mostly red states, would say you can't do it in our state. But all of the blue states arguably would be able to make abortion even more lenient than it might be now. So it doesn't end. There's this argument out there, oh my God, abortions would never exist in the country anymore. It would change everything. No. Every state would have the right to make their own decision.